Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. Did you know that Copernicus retained epicycles in his heliocentric model? It's a very odd thing because it was much, much truer, very, very much truer than the previous model that Ptolemy proposed, where the Earth sat still at the center and everything else moved around it in circles. And some of the circles were rather bizarre in order to account for some of the motions that we see in the real world. Now, why did Copernicus retain his heliocentric model? Epicycles in his heliocentric model. Here's the problem that he faced. The ancient Ptolemaic system was very accurate. Used these little circles upon circles, teeny tiny circles, in order to get exact calculations about the movement of the planets. And the planets are very irregular if you don't know how or why they're moving, and if you think that everything's moving in perfect circles, then they're extremely irregular. So you've got to figure out how to get perfect circles in there. And Copernicus published this book called De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, on the revolution of the celestial orbs. He published it in 1543, and you will note that he perished in 1543, or he was on his deathbed when the book proofs were handed to him. So it was published as he died. Not that he hadn't finished it before, but it was fearful. You shouldn't publish something like that lest the Pope burn you at the stake. So he didn't publish it while he was alive. And indeed, there was a little foreword added to it without his knowledge or permission that said these writings should be considered mathematical conveniences or something like this, mathematical wanderings or fantasies or conveniences, mathematical somethings, but not reality. Not reality. So anyways, Copernicus published that on his deathbed. He proposed the heliocentric universe where the sun's at the center, but he still had to use, he assumed perfect circular orbits, and he still had to use the epicycles for his math. Now, he assumed the circular orbits because it's heaven. Heaven's, everything up there is perfect and circular. He couldn't go that far, right? Now, it turns out there was a person who was doing measurements at the time that Copernicus was around, and he got hold of this guy's measurements. It's not Tycho Brahe. He was much later. And I'm not sure I even know the individual's name, but somewhere in some of my notes about this, I do have his name. This individual was doing much more accurate measurements than Copernicus, and Copernicus didn't need measurements that accurate. And so if you look at the time, go back and look historically at the accuracy of Copernicus and the accuracy of this other guy who was also an astronomer at the time, Copernicus was not that great at accuracy. But he wanted to prove that the Earth was in motion, and he did. His observations were accurate enough to do that. And therefore his math and the resulting tables and stuff were not more accurate than the insane, contrived, ancient Greek epicycles, strangely enough. And he hadn't made the intellectual leap to realize that this is not perfect circles we're talking about here. So he proposed the sun's at the center, the Earth rotates daily, and that's revolutionary to people. Revolutionary at the time. If the Earth rotates daily, and you do a little bit of math on how big the Earth is, then you start realizing that the surface of the Earth at the equator is moving at some bizarre speed like 1,000 miles an hour. Now that actually is what it is. It's 24,000 miles circumference approximately, and it turns once every 24 hours. So that's 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. Now, somewhere around halfway between the equator and the North Pole, you're moving at 500 miles an hour. And at the North Pole, you're just spinning in a little circle. So it's a gradient of speed lower and lower towards the North Pole. But that's an insane speed, 500 miles an hour. Let's say you're in Germany or Poland where Copernicus was. And to propose that you're moving at somewhere in the neighborhood of 400, 500, 600 miles an hour, day in, day out as you wake up. And look at the birds. They're not flying about in massive gusts of wind, right? They're doing just fine. Look at the clouds. The clouds aren't behaving like everything's moving at 500 miles an hour. And besides that, 500 miles an hour is insane. That's crazy. If you take a bucket of water and spin it, the water will stay in the bottom as long as you spin it fast enough. So if there's something sitting on the bottom of the bucket on the outside, let's say we put a little ant standing on the outside, he will not be able to stay on there unless he holds on for dear life. And that's how we are on the surface of the earth. What the heck are we doing clinging to this thing that is spinning at such a tremendous rate? So it was just absurd. It was just absurd. Earth does not rotate daily. That's ridiculous. But Copernicus proved it does. And the heliocentric framework explained retrograde motion naturally. You didn't need epicycles to explain it. Okay? Epicycles are now just when we are passing Mars in our orbit, because the further out you are from the sun, the slower your orbit is. And when Venus or Mercury passes us, because they go whipping around, when this happens, sometimes it looks like the planet goes backwards and stands still and then moves forwards again. It looks very bizarre if you don't understand what's going on. It looks extremely bizarre. And that is what this retrograde motion of Mars moves across the sky night after night after night, then stops, and then it goes backwards, and then it continues and and that had to be explained with these bizarre little circles. And Copernicus's math using perfect circles was not as good as this ancient Greek contrived stuff. So he kept the epicycles and deference, all these are the mathematical tricks called deference, to fine-tune his planetary positions. Mercury and Venus required small epicycles to align predictions with reality. His system actually used nearly as many circles as Ptolemy's. Now, if you're a longtime fan, you've probably heard me say in history videos in the past that Copernican astronomy, the publishing of Copernican heliocentrism, did not revolutionize the math that was used by sailors on the oceans. They continued to use ancient Greek math from literally 1,500 years before. That is the math that they were using. Not only was it old math, it was utterly contrived with absolutely perfect circles as the center of everything, and the earth not moving at all in the middle of these perfect circles. And you put a whole lot of perfect circles together and get it so accurate that when Copernicus pointed out actually the earth is in motion and the sun is not moving, and we are going around the sun, and he showed and he gave the math, and he actually gave the way for people to build new tables. He said, here's how you build new tables. Here's the math for the new tables. And all that math was not as good as this ancient Greek, totally contrived stuff. So he had to use the ancient Greek math, ladies and gentlemen. He corrected the bizarre fantasy of the Greeks about perfection and circles in heaven and said, no, sun, earth go around sun. And he still used the contrived ancient Greek math. It was so accurate. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to be impressed by the Greeks. Okay, breakthrough deferred. Johannes Kepler solved the issue by replacing circles with elliptical orbits, eliminating most epicycles. You still need some because why are they going in these bizarre orbits? And then Isaac Newton later explained why. Because of gravity. And once he worked out the math of gravity, we were able to explain a lot of stuff, like the interactions between them and stuff. We didn't need any of the little fancy epicycles anymore. But man, those epicycles sure were useful. Man, those Greeks came up with a heck of a mathematical thing there. I guess not all of them, maybe just Ptolemy. It might have been his own invention. I don't know exactly how much of it was his, but it is the Ptolemaic system. And I haven't studied it because I've always dismissed it as contrived. And I don't know. Maybe someday I'll dive into it and study the Ptolemaic astronomical mathematics. Thanks for viewing. Patreon me if you appreciate me.